Caring for trees in modern landscapes requires far more than climbing skills and pruning tools. It requires understanding how trees grow, how soils function, how pests and diseases develop, and how structural defects influence risk. If you're preparing for the Board Certified Master Arborist exam, this series is designed to help you review the key concepts that experienced arborists are expected to understand. Preparing for the BCMA exam, the Board Certified Master Arborist credential represents one of the highest levels of professional recognition in arboriculture. Achieving it requires not only years of experience in the field, but also a deep understanding of the science, principles, and practices that guide modern tree care. Preparing for the BCMA exam means reviewing a wide range of topics, from tree biology and soil science to diagnostics, plant health care, pruning, risk assessment, and urban forest management. Many of these subjects are interconnected, and understanding how they fit together is essential for both the exam and professional practice. This series was created to help arborists organize and review those core knowledge areas. Across these chapters, we will walk through the major concepts that experienced arborists are expected to understand. We'll explore how trees function biologically, how they respond to environmental stresses, how arborists diagnose problems, and how management decisions influence tree health, structure, and longevity. The goal of this series is not simply to memorize facts for an exam. Instead, it is to build a clear framework for thinking about trees, so that the information required for the BCMA exam becomes easier to understand, remember, and apply in real-world situations. Whether you are actively studying for the Board-Certified Master Arborist exam or simply looking to deepen your knowledge of arboriculture, this series is designed to help reinforce the key concepts that define advanced professional tree care. Let's begin by looking at one of the most common sources of tree decline in urban environments: abiotic disorders and environmental stress. Imagine you're inspecting a declining tree in a landscape. The leaves are yellowing, the tips of the branches are dying back. The client immediately assumes the tree must have a disease or an insect problem. But when you look closely, you can't find a pathogen. No insects, no fungal fruiting bodies, no evidence of feeding damage. So what is happening? Many of the most common tree problems are not caused by insects or diseases at all. They are caused by environmental stress. These are known as abiotic disorders, and understanding them is essential for both real-world arboriculture and the BCMA exam. In this podcast, we are going to explore how non-living factors affect tree health, how to recognize the symptoms they produce, and how these stresses often set the stage for much larger problems later. Abiotic disorders involve stress or injury caused by non-living factors in the environment. The word abiotic literally means without life, which distinguishes these problems from biotic issues that involve living organisms such as insects, fungi, bacteria, or nematodes. For arborists, distinguishing between abiotic and biotic problems is one of the most important diagnostic skills. Misidentifying the cause of tree decline can lead to wasted treatments and continued damage. In this podcast, we will discuss the major environmental factors that cause abiotic disorders, how trees respond to stress, and the visible symptoms that arborists use to diagnose these conditions in the field. Understanding these concepts will also prepare you for later chapters on tree biology, soils, and plant health care. An abiotic disorder is any abnormal condition caused by non-living environmental factors. These factors may include temperature extremes, soil chemistry, water stress, pollution, or mechanical injury. The key point here is that the cause is environmental rather than biological. By contrast, a biotic issue involves a living causal agent, such as an insect pest, fungus, or bacteria. One of the first things arborists learn to distinguish during diagnosis is the difference between a symptom and a sign. A symptom is the plant's response to stress, such as chlorosis, wilt, or dieback. A sign is the actual presence of the organism causing a disease, such as fungal spores or insect frass. Abiotic disorders generally produce symptoms, but not signs. Now let's talk about how these symptoms appear. One of the most common symptoms arborists see is chlorosis, which is the yellowing of foliage due to a loss or lack of chlorophyll. Sometimes chlorosis appears between the leaf veins in the intervenal tissue while the veins remain green. Chlorosis is often related to nutrient deficiency. A tree may lack an essential nutrient, or the nutrient may be present in the soil but unavailable to the roots. Trees require both macronutrient and micronutrient elements for growth. Macronutrient elements such as nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are required in larger quantities, while micronutrient elements like iron, manganese, and zinc are needed in much smaller amounts. A nutrient deficiency occurs when the tree cannot obtain enough of a required nutrient to support normal growth. However, problems can also occur in the opposite direction. When excessive levels of an element are present, the tree may suffer from nutrient toxicity. This toxicity can damage plant tissues and disrupt physiological processes. Another common symptom associated with abiotic disorders is necrosis. Necrosis refers to dead tissue, and when plant cells die, they often appear dark or brown. When leaves show these dead areas, they are described as necrotic. Necrosis can appear in several patterns. Marginal necrosis occurs along the edges of leaves, while blotch or spot patterns may appear across the leaf surface. When this type of injury spreads, the foliage may appear scorched. Leaf scorch is often associated with drought stress, salt injury, or root damage. In severe cases, the canopy may experience defoliation, which means the premature loss of leaves. As stress continues, branches may begin to decline. The progressive death of branch tips is known as dieback. In some situations, branches on one side of the tree may suddenly lose their leaves, a condition known as flagging. Now here is where things get interesting for arborists. Abiotic stresses often start small, but can escalate over time. An acute stress event happens suddenly. For example, exposure to herbicide drift or a sudden freeze could cause an acute injury. On the other hand, chronic stress develops slowly over time. Soil compaction, repeated drought stress, or nutrient imbalance can create chronic stress that gradually weakens a tree. Soil compaction is particularly common in urban landscapes. When soil becomes compacted, pore space decreases and oxygen availability declines. Roots require oxygen to function properly. Healthy root systems operate in aerobic soil conditions, where oxygen is present. When soils become saturated or heavily compacted, they may become anaerobic, meaning oxygen levels are too low for proper root respiration. Under anaerobic conditions, roots struggle to absorb water and nutrients, which can lead to symptoms such as chlorosis, wilt, and stunting. Stunting refers to reduced or slowed growth compared to what is normal for the species. Environmental chemistry can also play a role. Soils may be acid or alkaline, depending on their pH level. High acidity or strongly alkaline conditions can interfere with nutrient availability. This is something that often shows up on certification exams. Trees may show nutrient deficiency symptoms even when the soil contains sufficient nutrients because the soil chemistry prevents uptake. Some plants also release chemical compounds into the soil known as allelochemicals. Through the process of allelopathy, these chemicals can inhibit the growth of nearby plants. In natural ecosystems, allelopathy can influence plant competition and species distribution. Another major environmental factor affecting trees is water stress. Desiccation occurs when plant tissues lose water faster than they can replace it. This is especially common during winter, when evergreen leaves lose moisture while roots remain frozen in the soil. Winter burn is a classic example of desiccation injury. In extreme cold events, trees may suffer winter kill when tissues are damaged beyond recovery. Cold temperature fluctuations can also cause frost crack. This occurs when rapid temperature changes create stress in the wood, causing the trunk to split. Sun exposure can also create problems. Sunscald occurs when winter sunlight warms the bark on the south or southwest side of a tree, causing tissue damage when temperatures drop suddenly. Sunburn occurs when exposed tissues overheat and are damaged by intense sunlight. Young trees that have not properly hardened off before winter are especially susceptible to these injuries. Hardiness refers to a tree's ability to tolerate cold temperatures. Species that evolved in colder climates generally have greater hardiness. Some plants have evolved to tolerate extremely dry environments. These species are known as xerophyte plants and have adaptations that allow them to survive drought conditions. Urban environments introduce additional stresses. For example, de-icing salts used on roads during winter can damage tree roots and foliage. Salts can disrupt water uptake and cause marginal leaf scorch. Industrial pollution can also affect trees. Contaminated runoff or wastewater, known as effluent, may introduce harmful chemicals into soil or waterways. Some of these chemicals are phytotoxic, meaning they are toxic to plants. When plants absorb toxic substances, the result may be tissue damage, chlorosis, necrosis, or abnormal growth patterns. Speaking of abnormal growth, trees sometimes respond to stress with unusual structural changes. One example is fasciation, a condition in which stems become flattened or ribbon-like due to abnormal growth patterns. Structural issues below ground can also create serious problems. A girdling root occurs when a root grows around the trunk, or another root, and compresses vascular tissues. Over time, this restricts the movement of water and nutrients within the tree. This restriction may eventually produce symptoms, such as vascular discoloration and canopy decline. Field-based arborist examples. Imagine you're inspecting a street tree that shows marginal scorch and intervenal chlorosis. At first glance, it might look like a disease. But when you evaluate the site, you notice heavy soil compaction, poor drainage, and salt residue from winter road treatments. The symptoms are actually the result of abiotic stress rather than a pathogen. This kind of diagnostic thinking is critical for arborists. Diagnostic thinking for arborists. Abiotic disorders rarely occur in isolation. When trees experience repeated stress events, they may enter what is called a mortality spiral. The tree becomes progressively weaker as stress reduces its ability to produce energy, grow new tissues, and defend itself. Eventually, weakened trees become highly susceptible to opportunistic pests and pathogens. At that point, secondary disorder problems appear. Insects or fungi attack the already weakened tree. This is why identifying the original abiotic stress is so important. Concept reinforcement. Let's review the key ideas from this chapter. Abiotic disorders are caused by environmental factors rather than living organisms. They produce symptoms such as chlorosis, necrosis, dieback, scorch, wilt, and defoliation. Environmental conditions like soil compaction, nutrient imbalance, temperature stress, drought, pollution, and salt exposure are common causes. These stresses may be acute or chronic, and when they persist, they can push trees into a mortality spiral, where secondary disorder problems begin to appear. Understanding the difference between symptoms and signs helps arborists determine whether a problem is abiotic or biotic. Summary. Abiotic stress is one of the most important and often overlooked drivers of tree decline. For BCMA candidates, recognizing these patterns in the field is essential. Many exam questions focus on identifying symptoms and understanding environmental causes of tree health problems. In the next podcast, we will go deeper into tree biology, understanding how trees grow, transport water and nutrients, and respond to stress will help explain why these abiotic disorders affect trees the way they do. In this series, we'll move step by step through the core knowledge areas of arboriculture. We'll begin with tree biology and plant health, then explore soils and water relations, then move into practical arboriculture practices like pruning, installation, and structural support. Finally, we'll cover advanced topics including tree risk assessment, appraisal, business relations, and urban forest management.